Hello again, everyone. You're listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. My name is Geoff Micks. I'm Executive Platform's Head of Content and Research. My guest today is Erik Liederbach of Qnary. Erik is a social strategy and marketing executive who specializes in partnering with C-suite executives and other senior leaders to create and execute social media and marketing strategies that deliver results, maintain a positive presence, and build brands. Erik has worked for companies ranging from startups all the way through to Fortune 500 across a wide range of industries, and with a particular emphasis on cybersecurity leaders, which I hope is going to resonate with some of the CISOs who attended our recent North American Information Security Information Summit. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Erik, thank you so much for joining me today.
Geoff, thanks so much for having me on the Blueprint podcast.
Why don't we start off by clarifying a few things for our audience? Many of the senior leaders in Executive Platforms Network built their careers up before the current range of social media platforms existed. I think most of them are on LinkedIn, but maybe they view that more as a networking tool to stay in touch with people who move between jobs or for career development purposes, rather than an exercise in brand building. What are some of the misconceptions you want to clarify for executives who maybe think of social media as something the younger generation is doing in their careers, but maybe it isn't for them?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, right? So a lot of executives will think that social media is just something for, as you said, the younger generation. And a lot of the executives that I work with will actually tell me, hey, I don't want to be an influencer. And I say, fine. What we're going to do is use social media to accomplish your career goals. So I actually think that it's just a mechanism by which that they can advance their career. And social media is adaptable and malleable enough that you can use it to accomplish a number of different things. So rather than an influencer, I talk to them about becoming a thought leader in their field and using that thought leadership then to promote their organization and become an employer of choice, by thereby attracting new talent into their organization and retaining their existing talent by recognizing them through comments and social media posts that create a positive company culture for them. So I think that really in today's executive world, if you don't have a social media presence, it's actually looked at as a bit suspect or suspicious. So if you look someone up and they have no presence, you're almost not going to take them seriously, because any executive that's well represented within their industry is going to have some amount of social media presence. So one of the things I talk about with my clients as we're working on their brands is this idea of trust generation, right? So social media, having a presence, sharing who you are and what your company is and your mission and the work that you're doing builds trust with your key stakeholders. It expands your network, and that's just a vital part of any organization.
I mean, those are some great points, and I do want to expand upon them. Maybe we'll start from the position of people who haven't been doing as much as they should. What kind of social media presence and personal brand advice do you have for executives who, maybe haven't been broadcasting what they're doing throughout their working lives?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of people wonder, where do I start? And I start with the foundation. So first we start with why, right? That was Simon Sinek's great TED Talk, and I think it's actually applicable here. So we start with why. Why are we spending time on social media? Any executive is going to be extremely busy. They don't have enough hours in the day. If you're going to ask them to invest time in their social media presence, in their personal brand, then they need to have a clear justification. They need to have a return on that investment. And so that's why I mentioned, okay, we can use this as a tool to accomplish your goals. So rather than say, try and pitch them on something that they're not interested in, I like to ask them, what are you interested in? And now we're going to tailor that strategy and your personal brand around that. So I start with why. What are your goals? And then we work backwards from there. For instance, who do you want to reach, right? You're going to represent your personal brand differently depending on the audience that you want to be most appealing towards. So identify your audience, your goals, and then we work backwards from there. So after discovering why, we talk about what. So what are your actual pillars going to be? And I have a model that tends to work pretty well for most executives. We start with your company. So being a leader within your organization, any C-suite leader needs to be well represented within their organization. So that's one component. You want to be promoting your company, but then we balance that with two other pillars to represent your brand. And the second would be an expert in your field. So regardless of what industry you're in, you're going to want to promote your expertise within that industry. And there you want to own a specific topic. So if you're in cybersecurity, there's so much to talk about. You might want to focus less on the technical aspect and more on just, the more soft skills that are important for cybersecurity executives. So things like being able to communicate with your board effectively, being able to create a high-performing team. Those are the aspects that you want to be known for in that field, because you know that your competitors, they have the technical aspects down. And those soft skills are going to be more rare and more valued by the C-suite executives and boards that are going to be hiring you for that role. And that last pillar, I call becoming a person of character. So we don't want to lean too far into any one pillar. If we lean too far into promoting your company, it'll come off as inauthentic. And essentially the work that we're doing could be done on your social media's brand page. If we lean too far into the personal side, it will come across as more like a Facebook way to represent yourself, or it'll fall into that influencer category where we're telling too much about your personal life, too much about your values, and it's just taking away from the professional aspect of the brand image. And then after we establish, okay, these are your pillars, this is how we want to represent your brand, we need a mechanism by which we can accomplish that. And so that's where the social media strategy comes in. That's the how. And so there are a couple of different ways in which we can actually accomplish representing your brand. But I like to start with the idea of social media being a team sport. So no one wants to come off as self-promotional. It's something that everyone almost universally rejects. And I think you spoke to that earlier when you were saying, okay, senior executives tend to have this resistance to social media. And from my experience, if I'm working with a C-suite executive at, a Fortune 500 company or a founder, regardless, they never want to come off as promotional, yet they understand the need to have a presence. Typically, they get, okay, social media is valuable, it's a tool, they see how large the industry is. So I tell them social media is a team sport. And what I mean by that is actually the most value that you can do for your brand is not necessarily going to be creating, 100 of your own social media posts. It's creating some of your own social media posts, but then working on engagement. And by that, I mean interacting with other thought leaders in your industry. So if you want to become an expert in your field, the best thing you can do is start talking with other experts in that field, just as you would in real life. The same rules apply. And you can comment on their posts, you can repost their own content, and actually engage with them. And the same goes for your company. So rather than just, going on social media and creating 100 different posts with your own ideas, you can look at your executive team. Maybe your CEO recently shared an article or an interview that he had on ABC News or something. You can share that content, and in that way, you're helping your team out. And promoting yourself is kind of a side effect of that, but it really demonstrates, I think, that idea of almost servant leadership, where you're choosing to highlight and engage with others. And that's how you build an organic following, because you're actually adding value to other people on social media, and they begin to understand your brand through your actions rather than your self-promotion.
That's terrific. And I love the idea of it's not an exercise in self-promotion, it's a team activity. I think one of the things our audience is going to be most interested in, and you did touch on it a little bit earlier, is the idea of, it's yourself being a positive reflection of the business. So it's not to say there isn't going to be a personal brand involved. There is going to be content on an individual basis, but you're also playing into the company's media presence. So in a world where everyone wants to attract top talent and being an employer of choice, how do you stand out? Well, here I am on social media talking about the things that matter to us. Can we talk about that a little bit more? Expand on the idea of you are an ambassador for your company so that the people you want to have work for you seek you out.
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe let's do a use case, right? So say you're a chief information security officer, you're managing a global team. There's a huge talent in cybersecurity. All cybersecurity executives talk about this. There's a huge need for talent in the industry. So it's really relevant to cybersecurity executives to, as you said, stand out as that employer of choice. What can they do in order to accomplish that? I would start by saying, they're going to need help. They're going to need help, and a great leader knows when to ask for it, right? So what they can do is talk with, I would say, their marketing team or an outside agency after speaking with their marketing team and say, this is something that's really important to me. I want to work to promote the company, help us become an employer of choice. And in that interaction, they're also, I think, helping themselves out in how they're viewed within the company. So if you are going to invest that time into becoming kind of a brand ambassador, it makes sense to be recognized for that within the company. So they understand, hey, if you see me being a lot more active on social media, I'm not doing that in order to promote myself. My objective here is to advance our company and our goals. I think that's a really important thing to prime your other C-suite colleagues with, so that when they do see you being more active, they understand that this is in service of the organization. So I would start there. And after talking to the right people within your organization, establishing, some people that you can team up with, I would start by, what we said, where, okay, what are our goals? We want to attract more people. How do I want to represent myself on social media? That's the what component. And from there, I would establish your own thought leadership. So that would be posts, blogs, interviews on podcasts, representing the ideas that drive your team. And then in addition to that, you'd want to be engaging with the other people in your organization, your company's brand content, and think about yourself as the personal side of your brand's marketing strategy. So people engage with people, not brands. That's something I say to my clients a lot. And social media platforms understand this. That's why LinkedIn will charge brands a premium to boost their content, whereas they incentivize users to post on social media and give them that boost without charging them extra. So you'll get much greater reach if you are the one doing the marketing strategy, doing the posting, creating the articles, than the brand will. And that is something that typically resonates with your marketing company or chief marketing officer. So I would start by talking with your team and establishing your brand, and then going from there.
I think that is a great point. I mean, obviously, if you're not to say stepping into marketing's territory, but if you're collaborating and want to build upon what they're doing, communication is going to be key. I wonder if we can talk about where the line is, though. So, I mean, if I'm a chief information security officer, marketing really isn't my thing, but I do want to build this brand and build this presence. Which accounts are mine? Which are the companies? Are there particular channels I should be using or not using? Like, let's assume I don't really know this space at all. Should I be going to the marketing team with here is my game plan, or should I be asking questions? What does that conversation look like, and what pieces of information should I hope to come away with?
Yeah, so I would say, again, yes, I would go to the marketing team, and I would be asking questions only because that is how you build trust within your organization. I just think that if you're going to invest in this, you want it to be a team initiative. But to your primary question, which is what platforms should I really be investing in? Do I need to be on Instagram? Do I need to be on X? Where should I be putting my energies? I would say that it varies a little bit depending on what industry you're in. So if you're located in Silicon Valley, you're involved in tech, X might be a good platform for you because it still has a decent presence in that tech VC Silicon Valley community. If you're a chief information security officer, you may want to have a presence on X and LinkedIn. That's probably where I would put my efforts. And then YouTube as well. YouTube ranks really great in Google's algorithms because they own, Google owns YouTube. But that also requires greater investment on your end. So for instance, if you want to have a presence on YouTube, You might need to host your own podcast, and that you're definitely going to need help with from your, marketing team if you're going to launch that. I would say that the most easily accessible and most valuable platform you could be on as an executive would be LinkedIn. I think that that's the appropriate platform for your goals. And if we go back to those three kind of guiding ways to define your brand, I would say that LinkedIn is a fit because it's that balance of personal, company branded, and then also there's a ton of industry thought leadership on the platform. So LinkedIn would be my number one pick.
Now, you work in this space all day, every day, so I hope you won't mind me picking your brain a little bit. I know X is definitely still a player in the space, but I think we can all sort of acknowledge it isn't what it once was, and there have been lots of conversations about alternatives to that microblogging format. Do you have thoughts about Blue Sky or Threads or Mastodon or any of these others? Are there any that people should be keeping an eye on that will potentially do very well or are already doing very well? Do you have clients who are in those spaces?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I would keep an eye on Threads, but I think that overall, what I think about is when you're choosing a platform, pick one platform to own. And if you're going to, again, invest not only your time, but probably your company's time, because you're going to have a team behind you on this initiative, or at least an executive assistant or someone on your comms team who's helping you out. If you're going to, invest to that extent, I advise my clients and the executives I work with to pick a safer platform. There's so much volatility in social media, and we see, some very volatile platforms like X rise in popularity, fall in popularity, and same, we've seen that with Threads as well, where I don't feel like it's really taken a hold that can be lasting. So if you were going to establish a brand on a platform, I wouldn't want that platform to fall off in 2 or 3 years and become entirely abandoned. The final thing that I would consider when choosing a platform is to consider the reputation, the brand reputation of that platform. So some clients I work with have actually chosen to not be on X, not because of the reach, but because they don't think that it aligns with their, the way in which they want to represent their brand and their values. And you've also seen advertisers, leave X for that reason. And there's currently a lawsuit between Elon and a group of advertisers who have left the platform because of considerations over their brand.
I'll say, just for the sake of transparency, Executive Platforms recently let go of all of its X accounts. It just didn't reflect the values that we want to put out there. And there was also some feedback from different events that we run, like you guys are still on X. So once you start hearing that from your audience, you have to take it seriously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to go back to LinkedIn as a number one pick, LinkedIn, more so than any other social media platform, has civil discourse. And that is, it's a safer environment. There's less toxicity, and there's less kind of anger, I would say. You can read the social media can, like the internet, divide us. And I think that LinkedIn, because it's attached to your career, your goals, your resume, it has an impact the way in which you present yourself and what you say on LinkedIn. There's stakes there, and that tends to lead to less volatility, which then makes there less risk on the brand's part for being on that platform. It's a safer place to have a presence when you're thinking about how you're representing your brand.
We've been talking a lot about the work that you do with clients, and maybe I should actually ask a question about Qnary. It sounds like it's a really valuable partner if this is a space that people want to get serious about. Talk to me about what the business actually does. How do you partner with organizations? What does getting started look like when people are looking to solve this issue? Like, how are they typically coming to you? What are some of their starting questions? Let's get into that.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So Qnary is an executive reputation management company. And so we help executives do exactly this, establish their brand, but then also accomplish their career goals or their company's goals, especially if I'm working with a founder or a CEO, those Venn diagrams overlap. Through social media. So again, we use social media as a tool to accomplish their goals. When you're starting with us, we're going to first listen. We're going to seek to understand you, understand your space, and understand the goals that you have, whether those are long-term goals for your company, or maybe you're looking to have a career change and you want to change the way in which you're representing yourself on social media. So after doing an adequate amount of listening, then I'm going to come back and say, hey, these are my ideas for your brand. After talking with you, I noticed that this idea of servant leadership came up a lot. I know that's a really important part of your character. You've gotten to where you are because you seek to help out your team members first. And that's something that people recognize as soon as they speak to you. So I wanted to ask you more about that. I wanted to ask about some of the mentors that you've had in your career. And maybe if you could tell me a couple of examples in which you've chosen to lead in that way. And we'll have a conversation around that. After establishing those brand pillars, then we're going to link your social media accounts to our app and our technology. And from there, I go back to my team. We have a content team that will be writing all of your social media content from this strategy and posting that through our app and technology. That goes to you. And each week you'll have, say, maybe 10 different pieces of content. That'll be video, reposts, comments. As I mentioned, that engagement piece is so important because social media is a team sport. So you might see, one repost from the CEO of your organization, if you're the CISO, of a recent earnings report. And, previously to working with Qnary, you wouldn't really comment on the earnings report, but now you're creating a post that shouts out all the work that went into that achievement and naming people on your team, because I know from our earlier conversation, that idea of servant leadership, of recognizing the employees on your team for their work is really important to you. So we would tailor the copy so that it's in line with your voice and represents your brand accordingly.
I wonder if we could illustrate what we've been talking about with a specific example. And I appreciate, maybe you don't want to name names. Clients are allowed to have their confidentiality, but how good can this be? If someone is saying, what does this really look like in real terms? What is your success story that you like to share?
Yeah, it's a good question. We talked about the idea of social media being a team sport and people latching onto that idea because they don't want to come off across as self-promotional. So what that looks like in action is I was working with a cybersecurity executive, a CISO, and CISOs, also tend to be more technical. They tend to be more resistant to this idea of social media. And when I said, okay, let's think about the ideas that are most interesting to you. What aspects of cybersecurity are you curious about? Are you passionate about? Where does that passion lie? And we had that conversation, and she was really interested in the soft skills that are necessary for the role and how they're not talked about enough on social media. And that CISOs tend to be thought of as just, highly technical leaders. But she wanted to talk about how exactly the same skills that are required for a CEO to lead, she represents in her work. So rather than creating an article or a blog or something of her espousing her ideas, what we did was our content team went out and found a post from LinkedIn Top Voice on that very topic, talking about the role of servant leadership within cybersecurity. So we took that post and reposted it with her own thoughts. And what was surprising to her, but not to me, was that was, out of a year of review, her top performing piece of social media content. It got over 100,000 impressions. And that was what people latched onto, was her thoughtful critique of that post, saying this is a great idea, but I'd like to add my 2 cents on it. That's what really took off. And over time, using that strategy of, rather than creating her own content, we were mainly, talking with other top LinkedIn voices and leaders within cybersecurity. She built a really engaged following. So, because she had paid it forward, because she had taken that personal touch, she had commented on their articles, she had reposted them. She built this loyal following that was invested in what she had to say on social media. And over time, within actually 1 year, she became a LinkedIn top voice. Not, she doesn't have a crazy amount of followers. She actually has, I think right now we're at 4,500 followers, which is, I would say, lower than you might think of, when we were talking about influencer versus thought leader. You might think of an influencer as someone with 100,000 followers or something. And she said, look, I don't care. I get so many LinkedIn requests, most of them are from salespeople. I don't care about the number. I really want to just engage in meaningful conversation. And that authenticity, that personal character, that third component of the brand pillars, that really came through for her audience. And she saw the results, and LinkedIn reached out to her and said, we love what you've been doing. We'd like to make you a LinkedIn top voice. So that's what success can look like. I think she, her goals were accomplished. And while she doesn't have the highest number of followers, the people that she is engaging with really find what she has to say valuable.
I love that example. And I'll also say it resonates with me and executive platforms because, as an industry events company, we are sort of a boutique firm, I guess you could almost say. The events industry space, there are people who run, shows for 10,000 people. We don't want 10,000 people. We want the 200 or 300 people who are all of those people's bosses, right? Because we're running it at the very senior level. So in terms of a LinkedIn presence, the 4,500 people who are following what she has to say are probably cybersecurity specialists who care deeply about this content. She doesn't want to speak to the masses. She wants to speak to her peers about what matters to them. And I love that example. That's wonderful. I know, we've covered a lot of ground in this conversation. If there were a couple of things you wanted people to think about further, what would you want them to take away from this discussion?
I would say from everything that we've talked about today, we've talked a little bit about how to establish your own personal brand, what those three pillars might look like. So if you are doing that kind of self-reflection, if you're thinking about talking to your marketing team or going to outside help to represent your personal brand and use social media as a tool to do that, I would say this should be your thesis statement, which is be interested, not interesting, which is a favorite quote of mine from a Stanford professor of communications, Matt Abrahams. And what I mean by that is when you're thinking about your personal brand, lean away from the idea of being self-promotional. Think about what would be most valuable to your audience. And in that example of the chief information security officer that I gave, we saw how that worked out for her, right? So she sought to first be interested in what other people were saying, to learn and to listen, to comment and to repost from their content. And then she built a loyal following from that interest, from that authenticity.
And just before I let you go, I do want to acknowledge that you and Qnary do this sort of work for a living, and you're very, very good at it, obviously. I think there are going to be some senior leaders in our listening audience who like the idea of this, but they're going to have questions of their own, that I haven't put to you. For people who want to learn more, what's the best way to get in touch?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say connect with me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow Qnary, our company, and we'll reach out from there.
Fantastic. And I encourage everyone who has enjoyed this episode to reach out and have a conversation of your own. I've certainly enjoyed speaking with Erik. Erik, thank you so much for your time today. This has been great.
Geoff, can't thank you enough.
You've been listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. I've been Geoff Micks. Let's do it again soon.